Hello everyone, my name is Protesilaos, also known as Prot. In this video, I want to show you the tools I use to author text in French. I have been writing and publishing articles in French for a few days now, and I am relying on Emacs to do that in a manner that is easy and convenient. What I have here in this Scratch buffer is two package configurations. One pertains to the built-in input methods, which I will demonstrate. And the other is about a package called Jinx, a package that is developed by Daniel Mendler, the author of many great packages for Emacs, such as Vertigo, Consult, Corfu, and others. Let me show you how this works, starting with the input methods that are built into Emacs. I have comments here in these code blocks, and I will include them on my website from where you can copy them. So I don't need to go over the comments. You can read those at your own pace. Let me just demonstrate. So I have here a plain text buffer, and what I want to do is switch to the input method. Right now, I am just using Emacs without an input method, so this will use whatever my physical keyboard is sending as key codes. So in my case, that is US QWERTY. So now I will just switch to an input method. I will do it here with set input method. We see here the command, and this gives me the option to select. I can pick one of the French input methods. There are different ones. And then, of course, there are other languages as well. For example, Greek, my mother tongue. And let me start with, for example, French postfix over here. When you have an input method, you will have some kind of indicator on your mode line. This is how I have configured it to look on my end. And with that, you know that your keys now are interpreted in a slightly different way, in a way that is governed by this input method. For example, if I type E, which is a vowel that can be accented in French, you will see at the bottom in the echo area where Emacs is telling me that you can type one of the following characters inside of square brackets to modify this E that you have over there so that it is E plus an accent. For example, if I do the single quote, I get this. If I do E and then the caret, I get the circumflex. So the acute, the circumflex. If I do E and double quotes, I get the, actually, I don't know how this is called in French, the umlaut, they call it in German. But anyway, the érisis maybe, the érisis would be the Greek word. I'm not sure. Um, and this is how you can basically write in French. Je peux écrire en français. You see cedilla over there, which is C followed by the comma. So just like that, I wrote something in French. Let me do MX describe input method over here so that I can learn about the input method that I am interested in. French postfix in particular is an input method that is basically QWERTY with the addition of composable characters, like what I show you there with the accents. So we can read about the French postfix input method here, and it says here, right, tréma is how that thing is called that I was in doubt earlier. And we can see here it is telling us how we can do the other thing and how we can do everything we need, right? We see it here. And further down, we have a table with all the key combinations, the sequences that produce the composed characters. For example, you see over here how it is. If I do O followed by the forward slash, I get this, okay? And I don't need to belabor this point. You can try it on your own. The point is that you set the input method and you start composing characters very easily this way. Let me do describe input method again and select Greek now. Because depending on the input method, the keyboard layout changes. So, for example, we can focus on this for a second. Here we have a representation of the keyboard layout. So if you have a standard QWERTY, and you switch to the Greek input method, the letter Q will send the Greek question mark, okay? This is the idea. Where we have the letter C, you will send the Greek psi letter, and so on. So let's actually switch away from this. And this is basically how you write. You switch to the input method and you start writing. When you are done, you do Emacs toggle input method, like this. And that will disable the input method, and you are back to writing in standard Emacs with the default keyboard layout that you have. Now, why would you want an input method inside of Emacs? The answer is twofold. One, because you get something that is easy to have in Emacs. And if you are writing always in Emacs, then this is nice. This is better for you. It's more convenient, you see, like this. But then the other thing is that if you have an input method that changes the characters, for example, the alphabet from Latin to Greek, then let's do it actually. Let's do it with Greek so that we see. Then you can still do something like MX, right? So if I type X, it's actually the Greek he letter. But if I do MX, Emacs understands that this is actually X for the purposes of performing some key binding over here, for the purpose of invoking some command. If I do Control C, and if I had the Greek layout physically, that would be understood as Control Psi, which Emacs doesn't have a binding for, whereas Control C is, of course, the regular Emacs binding. Let me switch 1 second away from the Greek input method, and using my system, my operating system, I will switch to Greek. I don't know if you see this pop-up that I am toggling between here. Maybe my video is in the way. But anyway, I switch to Greek now at the level of the operating system, so not inside Emacs. If I do now MX, it does something different. It does other things. If I do Control C, it says Control C is undefined, you see? So depending on the language you are writing in, you want to be using the standard keyboard layout so that Emacs can work, and then you switch to an input method, set input method, you select it, and you take it from there, okay? Now, let me move to Jinx, the package that I have over here. It is a package for spell checking. And like all of Daniel Mendler's packages, it is an excellent package. Note that it depends on an external program called libenchant. And here I have noted the name of the package that you need if you are using Debian and derivative operating systems. It's libenchant-2-dev. And once you have that, Jinx can work on your system. So now I will make some mistakes. Je vais faire des erreurs, like this. Let's do it like this. Okay, so I have some mistakes. Jinx has already highlighted them. Jinx can actually be multilingual, but for now, let's focus on just one language. If I go over a word and do MX Jinx correct, Jinx will offer suggestions for this individual word. Because Jinx is multilingual, it will offer suggestions for each of the languages you have configured it with. So in this case, it will show me for Greek, for French, for English, and for Spanish. When you have, by the way, something like this in the mini buffer, if you are using Vertigo and you see those sections, you can type meta and the left or right curly brackets, so the braces, to move to the next or previous section. So I will do that now. You see the key binding on my mode line, okay? And like that, you can quickly switch from one section to the other, so you don't need to keep scrolling the Greek words until you find the next language and so on, okay, like this. And you can do that. Notice that at the end, Jinx provides options to save your choice so that if you type some unusual word, which for you is correct. You can just have it stored there, that sort of thing. You can experiment with this yourself, plus read the excellent documentation that Daniel has written. So when I am ready, I can select here what I want, and I can continue to the next word. Alternatively, what I can do is Jinx correct all, which now will go word by word and offer this interface over here. Again, I can switch to the group. And by the way, here you can type. So if I type already FAIR, I see the options that complete this. So I can select, in this case, it's the verb faire. So I did that, and now it automatically moves to the next mistake. So again, I can do that, and I can type a little bit to narrow the results, or I can move between sections, as I showed you earlier, and I can select here the erreur. So just like that, I have corrected all my mistakes, and basically now I am good to go. This is what I am doing when I am writing in French. It is very nice, very easy to work this way, and it's just another good use of Emacs for authoring text, for writing prose, as well as programming and all the other things you can do with it. So that's all for today, folks. I will include these snippets on my website in the publication that will embed this video on my website. And if you are watching this on the video hosting platform, I will provide a link in the description. So that's all for now. Thank you very much for your attention. Take care and goodbye.